Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today I am joined by guest Luke Willis. Luke, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Jonathan.
So I've been on Luke's podcast a couple times, but I think this is your first visit here. So maybe you could tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Luke Willis. I am a developer by trade that is now working in the blockchain space. So I'm currently iterating on my positioning, and we'll get into that a little bit later, I assume. But yeah, so basically I am working with Web3 companies and dApp developers and trying to figure out the right way to position what I do and who I help, and then what specifically I should be offering for those groups.
Cool. Okay, so target market focus, product ladder, content marketing. Okay, so I'm familiar with all this, I know, but just for the listener, what content marketing are you doing now?
Yeah. So I basically copied the Jonathan Stark playbook and
Smart.
created a daily newsletter and a weekly podcast. I've been following your work for a long time, so just enjoyed the format a lot and the content, of course. So it was kind of a natural fit. I'd always been looking for something to take that approach with. And since I was in software, I didn't want to just be another voice of all the many developers talking about whatever it was, right? So when I decided to jump into the blockchain space, it seemed like there was a gap, and there was specific things that I wanted to talk about that I didn't see other people talking about. So I ran with it, and it's been going really well.
Cool. And on what metric would you say it's going really well? Like subscribers and downloads and, sort of like those sorts of content metrics? Or more like, okay.
I've only been doing this for 6 months or so.
That's shocking. It's so, just not to interrupt, but because I'm on your list, because I'm super interested in crypto for various reasons. Yeah. And we basically met, if I'm remembering correctly, or we started like a real conversation when I was trying to I was investigating mostly on Twitter, like trying to get past the hype and say like, is there actually a there, or is this just a bunch of Ponzi scheming frat boys with, what's going on here? Because a lot of this sounds pretty bad. But anyway, your superpower then and now is that you're amazing at actually describing what the heck is going on.
Thank you.
It's great in a reasonable way, and like a non-hyperbolic way. And the reason I interrupted you was because it feels like I've been on the mailing list for a lot longer than 6 months, in a good way.
That's awesome.
It feels like it's always been there.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how that being on the receiving end of a short daily message keeps you top of mind in the reader's inbox, top of inbox in the reader's mind about your area of expertise. So like in my mind, you are very well positioned, but I think a lot of it comes from, a lot of it in my mind is a combination of not just the mailing list, but the mailing list and conversations we've had either on your podcast or on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I do think there is some room for improvement there.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think it started, I reached out to you saying, hey, thanks for all you've done. I started a newsletter and it's gone well. And then you were like, oh, do you have a link? And it happened to be blockchain and something you were looking into. So that's good.
Yeah, cool. And then the podcast, how's that? What have you found from doing the podcast?
Yeah, the podcast has been great because so it's interesting because I don't have that many subscribers or listeners. I think I have like 150 newsletter subscribers and more than that reading on Twitter and all that. But it's weird because people who I know a little bit from this community are like, they treat me like I'm just like I've always been there, like you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's cool that I can have these discussions with people who I know are, very deeply into crypto. And so while I don't think the numbers very high, like the quality of the connections in terms of potential future business is really good. So if I can hit the positioning correctly, especially as this blockchain that I've kind of used as my centerpiece getting started, takes off, I'm in a good position to benefit from that.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely see that. And I think it's specific to my experience with the list and not through our conversation, but the sort of loose association, or your sort of like platform that you picked, if platform is maybe not the right word, but the protocol or whatever, but the horse you're betting on to a certain extent is Coinos.
Yep.
But you keep the newsletter pretty general. It's very specific, but it's not like shilling for Coinos.
Right. Yeah, and that's important to me because, yes, you're right that I started this initially thinking that I was just going to write about Coinos. And basically, it's a new blockchain, and it's being developed by a group, and one of the people is somebody that I really trust from real life. So I was just like you. I thought that crypto was all scams and Ponzi schemes, and was pretty skeptical about getting into it. I had no money in the game. And then when my friend started working in the space, I got a little bit more interested. And then when they started working on Coinos, I finally put in some time just to understand it a little bit more and kind of saw the light and decided to throw my effort at it. So yes, you're right that it started with Coinos, but the initiative there is all about accessibility of the blockchain space, where today people like you and me look at it and say, the perception's bad. I have to put in money before I can even try this thing out. There's a huge level of education here, just to really understand anything. And then, okay, now that I've put in money, I have to set up a wallet. What is that? And how do I manage that? And you're telling me that people can steal this just by knowing these words. And it's weird, right? So
there's a gigantic barrier to entry.
Correct. Yeah. So Coinos is really trying to reduce the barrier to entry. And so my angle was initially Coinos, but now I think it's beyond that, where I'll always put probably the majority of my effort towards Coinos. And I could just say I'm only doing stuff on Coinos. But I think that there are dApps, or decentralized applications for people listening, that are out there not on Coinos that would benefit from some of the lessons that I've learned and the messaging I have.
Yeah, that's my intuition, is that's the safer bet. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but the problem with problem, it's a double-edged sword betting on a platform.
Sure.
The benefit is that, and it doesn't matter if it's a blockchain or if it's Shopify or Facebook ads or whatever is the thing, the platform that a developer or a designer or really any independent professional, whatever the platform they bet on, if they have a platform specialization, their fortunes are going to rise and fall with the platform. So when the platform's on the rise, especially if they're early like you are, you can go to the moon, to coin a phrase.
Yeah.
But when the platform goes down, I'm thinking of Flash, then you're out of business overnight. And
right.
It's usually not that dramatic on either end, but I had a platform specialization at one phase of my career, and it's a platform that's steadily in decline. And so you see so the market is receding. They're not minting new customers really.
Right.
So that's normal. That's more what would be common. Like, I feel like, I don't know, Rails might even be, I don't know, Rails maybe never die, but there are platforms out there that were exciting and popular, and people were like, oh, I'm gonna be a Notion consultant or a Monday consultant or Airtable, and not that any of those are in decline, but if they do go down, then you've got, they become less popular, they get replaced by a shinier, newer thing. Then when people are, then you've got 5-10 years of, I don't know, content marketing out there that is no longer relevant. And you want to be, so for me, it feels like a safer bet to diversify into a little bit up from I don't love platform specializations. They can be real quick win, but for me, it's not a place to build a durable business, because eventually the platform, you're just betting on somebody else too much for my taste. That's all.
Sure.
That's really all it is.
I think that's fair.
And I think there's so much demand or need or desire for clarity in what the heck is going on in this whole space, that on the one hand, it feels like I'm suggesting like, oh no, be blurrier in your specialization. Like instead of focusing on this particular platform, be blurrier and be the person who can explain this space in plain English. But if you think about it, the larger ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, blockchain, crypto, Web3, dApps, whatever you want to call it, is still so new and poorly understood. And even though it could theoretically be a phase, it's surely less of a phase than any individual blockchain, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it feels like a safer bet, even though normally I'm telling people to drill down and get more specific. You're like way, way, way down in a specialization already. So for me, it feels, my intuition is a little bit more like, yeah, I wouldn't be particular on a blockchain. I think being a little bit more general in the specialization is still hyper specific. And the other thing in this space about talking about a particular blockchain too much is it's just like, oh, he's shilling.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, because it's rampant already. So to stay away from that, it's almost like your differentiator is that you never shill.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I never shill, but I don't shill without good reason, right? I'm not just saying Coinos to the moon or whatever. If I have a point to make about accessibility and its benefits from describing a specific feature of various blockchains, not just Coinos, I'm happy to put that out there. And I'll say in my newsletter all the time, if you're familiar with any other blockchain that has this capability or is thinking about this problem, please let me know. I would love to add it to my list of examples, because I feel like I pull on Coinos maybe too frequently, just because it's the only example I know in all my research that really is actually trying to tackle these problems.
Yeah. So for you, the onboarding experience is super important. And right now there's only one option.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I get that too. It's like in my podcasting course, I tell people to just use Zoom, even though it's not the best quality. There's just a variety of factors. It's the easiest for your guests because they definitely know it.
Right.
So so same thing when people are just getting started with something that is new and scary, like podcasting or crypto, then I'm like, make everything as easy as humanly possible, so that the onboarding experience is really, really smooth. And then once you get the basics down and it doesn't feel like you're on this massive learning curve all the time, then you can look around and start replacing little bits of your, workflow or whatever, your process, with something a little more sophisticated, a little bit more of a power tool type of thing. But yeah, so to tie that back to what I was saying before, between the platform specialization and more of the horizontal focus in the blockchain space in general, it feels like accessibility or onboarding. I don't love that word, by the way, because it's overloaded. But onboarding people into crypto in general feels much more like the sun in your solar system. Yeah. Versus like this, like you said, this chain's going to go to the moon, or this coin's going to go to the moon. It's like, it's not about that really. It just happens to be the only one it happens to be the best one right now, as far as you know. Right.
Yeah. So that's, I started out talking about Coinos because I wanted to get more involved and meet the smart people who are working on it, and just kind of expand my own learning much more quickly than going it alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you knew someone that you trusted from the real world.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that really de-risked it in my mind. Mm-hmm. So then from there, I realized that there's more to this, and I started using the positioning statement. I help full stack developers build ridiculously accessible blockchain apps. Mm. And that I think got some traction. People are interested in the idea of accessibility of blockchain, but you're right. It's an overloaded term. People are saying, well,
especially for web developers.
Yes. Is this about, ADA accessibility, right, or is this, color blindness and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Screen readers and right.
Yeah. Are we talking about, just onboarding a ton of users? Mm-hmm. And more the latter.
Right.
But that, like, if you put it that way, it sounds scammy, right? So I've been playing around with different approaches, and just in feedback I've gotten from people who I've interviewed for the podcast, it seems like there's opportunity for helping companies that are already in the Web3 space mm-hmm. with their dApps, more than like onboarding new people. Because I think there's already great tools and people that are writing content for that. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not quite like the same format. It's not necessarily a short newsletter or, so there's a little bit of a barrier of you got to put in the time to go through this course. But honestly, like I'm okay with letting other people take that and handle developers and various people who want to get in for one reason or another.
Yeah, like a sufficiently motivated developer can figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, even I deployed a smart contract. It's like, and I haven't barely coded 10 years. So, but it is a giant pain. It's really, well, anyway, whatever. So full stack. So you're not going to release a product that's like for full stack developers who wanted to deploy their first dApp in a weekend for free.
Right.
Right. Okay. So when you say help, so what was the newer help companies who are already in Web3 with their dApps? Like, what problems are they having with their dApps?
Yeah. So I've found that there's kind of two sides to this. So we talk about Web2, Web3. If you're using any website used today, Google, Facebook, whatever, those are all Web2. Mm-hmm. And then websites that are backed by the blockchain is a Web3 app or a dApp. So when I talk about Web3 companies, that's groups of people which are typically smaller than their revenue would suggest from what I see.
Smaller in what way?
Headcount.
Okay.
Like, 10 or 15 people, and they've already raised millions of dollars. And yeah. So the size factor, like they have money and they want to spend it on things that'll actually move the needle. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but what's the needle?
Right, the needle. So if they're coming at it from the Web 2 side and they're adding in Web 3 features, then most of the time they're already thinking about the stuff that I talk about, because they want to keep their existing users and bring some of them over to the blockchain side.
Okay, so but I'm assuming if a company with 10 or 15 people that has already raised millions of dollars, they're not an existing Web 2 company that has been doing pretty well, and then they're going to sprinkle some Web 3 on it. Right. Or so. Yeah,
usually those companies are on, like, they're pure Web 3, and they have a smart contract. Maybe they have a little bit of like a traditional back end somewhere, but like they try to just have a front end that talks to the smart contract and like keep it as light and decentralized as possible, which is great. But what that means for the experience for users is that they have to have a wallet loaded with tokens and understand what they're doing to even get started.
Right.
Which honestly, like, it's fine. You can have a business like that and be successful. There's enough people on Ethereum or whatever chain who have money to spend with you that you'll be fine. But you have to target like fewer higher value customers. Where right now there's like, I don't even know, it's like 1 to 5% of the world is on blockchain compared with, whatever the percentage is of the world that's actually using the internet.
I'm surprised it's that high.
Yeah. Well, I think those numbers are inflated because that's just like people who, when I say use blockchain, like maybe they set up a Coinbase account and threw $1 at it.
Oh, okay, right? Okay, yeah.
Like people who are actually going out and running dApps and all that. Like, I think that's
right. But how many wallets are there? That's the real number.
Right. And even that's misleading because most people who have a fair amount of money in the space have it spread across multiple wallets.
Right.
So, and it's hard to track that down because everybody's anonymous and yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so
yeah, so because when you said, established Web2 companies moving to Web3, that sounds like a really interesting market.
Yeah.
Like that could be a really good target.
Yeah, for sure. How the
heck are you gonna blend those two things? How are you gonna migrate that over?
Right. And there's a huge perception issue with that too. Like gaming companies are very interested in adding like NFTs into the if you want to have a character skin, you could sell that as an NFT. And then the benefit to that would be if somebody plays your game, they like it, they want to buy it. Okay, they can do that. And then if they want to stop playing your game today with Web2, they're just stuck. They spent the money, it's gone. With that being an NFT, there's a secondary market for that. You can go and you can sell that skin or whatever it is to somebody else.
Right.
So you can take the money that you put in and move it to whatever else you want to do.
Right. And you could imagine, so now like CSGO has an in-game marketplace already, and I'm sure others do as well. Roblox, I think.
Yeah.
So, which doesn't require blockchain at all. And
true. But that's a feature that they had to build.
Exactly. Right. That's exactly where I was going with that. Because most games don't have that.
Right.
And I can imagine why. It sounds like a massive undertaking.
Right.
But wow, what a moneymaker. So if you could, so it almost does, as complex as all of this stuff is, it almost does seem like the cheaper and easier way is to get, and because like these kids, like these 12-year-olds, they'll figure out a wallet. Like they can, it's unbelievable. Like I have a 12-year-old. It's unbelievable the stuff they figure out. You know, in terms of like the hoops they'll jump through to improve their frame rate, or it's unreal. So they aren't familiar with any other. They don't have another option anyway.
Right.
It's not like they, So it almost does seem like, shockingly, like a path of. It might even be the path of least resistance. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the gaming company could set up the contract in such a way that they get a percentage of every sale in the secondary market.
True. Yeah, they could make royalties off of future sales.
Yeah. So it would be, so as the player, you can get your money out of it and maybe make money. I mean, you could theoretically speculate. Mm-hmm. I mean, they do it, the people do it in CSGO.
Right.
But you can you ever, I don't think you can ever cash out. That's the thing. I don't think you can ever cash out.
Yeah, I mean, with games where the marketplace is all within the game, usually you're trading some in-game currency, and there's not always an off-ramp to convert that into whatever money you want.
Yeah, you'd almost have to do it on like Craigslist or something, like eBay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's actually a thing. Like for World of Warcraft players back in the day, you would get your account to level whatever it was, and then if you didn't want to play anymore, you could just auction off your password. And then like that's a thing you could do.
Yeah, I knew a kid in the 90s. I met a kid in the 90s who was 16 at the time, and he would just come home and play EverQuest all evening after school, and then meet up with adults in the game and sell them magical items that he had crafted or found and on eBay. And it was like, I was like, my head exploded back then. Now it's like common practice, and this stuff's built in. But anyway, okay. So there's an example of a potentially interesting target market. So gaming companies that want to explore this space, like, the combination of NFTs and it's not really in-game marketplace anymore, but it is a secondary market. Create a secondary market for skins. And that's how much have you explored that? Like you brought it up, you must have thought about it before. So how much exploration have you done into that space?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. I guess the interesting thing about that to me is the perception. Like because they have Web2 users, what I've seen is that when they announce we're going to add in NFTs, like the community revolts. Because it's a scam and it's just a money grab and whatever you want to call it. There are benefits to the technology, for the users, for the players, or whatever. We could talk about gaming, we could talk about event ticketing, any number of things. But as soon as you throw around the buzzword of NFT, you're going to polarize your audience.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it that. I just call it skins.
Right, exactly. And if it's an NFT, great. If it's not, whatever.
Yeah, they don't even need to know, really.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing I don't think people get is when you're a Web2 company, you're looking at all these blockchain companies with crazy valuations and money, and you're saying, I want in on that action. So you want to broadcast to the world that you have NFTs, but your users don't care. They might care once you put it in front of them and they play with it and they say, oh, actually, that's cool. But it's not a selling point. For the people that it is a selling point, great. You can put it in, Bitcoin Magazine or something. But for your average user that is already playing your game, they don't care. They don't want
my same and just one data point. My 12-year-old, I asked him, like, do you know what NFTs are? And he rolled his eyes. And he was like, yeah, that's when somebody spends $1 million for a stupid JPEG for their profile picture. Yeah. Right. So you're right. Like, exactly. But I don't even see, like, if the gaming company, not that we need to solve this technically, but if the gaming company acted as a custodian of the private keys, then it would be they'd still have that vulnerability, but they'd have that anyway. Right. If they were doing it in the Web 2 way that CSGO did. Right. So there's a couple differences. When you're the custodian of the private keys, you have the risk. But if it's all in your centralized database and somebody, hacks in and steals your data, okay, you got some bits that describe the sword of whatever, right? But you can't do anything with that. If it's on blockchain and you get access to that, well, now you can go sell it. And the company is just out. They don't have that anymore. Now you can write your smart contracts in a way that lets you like revoke and recreate and stuff like that. So you can reduce the risk that way. But yeah, like having custodial accounts where the company or some third party owns the wallets for the users, and then if you have sufficiently advanced users who want to transfer it to their own wallets, that's fine. You enable that. But really, you make it an option.
Exactly. Yeah, you make it an option. But if you want to have ease of access for non-blockchain savvy users, the wallets are the big part. They don't want to manage that. And then the tokens. Like today, if you were to build anything like this on Ethereum, they would have to go buy ETH tokens to start playing your game, which is ridiculous. Yeah. So we need to have solutions, and this is why I'm keen on Koinos, where the company can hold the tokens for the users and still let them play the game. So
hold the keys.
So the keys to the wallets, but also the tokens to power transactions. So on Ethereum, the person who's performing the transaction has to own the token, the ETH. So even if it's a custodial wallet, there has to be ETH in the wallet for you to do anything.
Right. So in your terminology, Coinbase is holding that coin?
Correct.
Because they have the private key.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So we don't need to solve this, but I do think I just wanted to go down that a little bit to see if there was an interesting, in theory, one could build an entire business around enabling the secondary market, behind the scenes with blockchain and private keys without, the marketing of that to the gamers. Like that's a separate issue, but you could maybe that's part of what you would tackle. It's like, well, how do we sell this to users? It's like, you just like make it, it's just a different way to build. You wouldn't sell the concept of a secondary market. In other words, you wouldn't need to explain to gamers that, oh, now you can sell your knife skin. Right. They'd be like, sweet, awesome. Yeah. And you wouldn't normally be like, in the back end is Postgres and we're using APIs and, it's like, no one cares.
Right.
It's just a way for the gaming company to start to get into the space in a way that is just as secure.
Right.
But I'm sure there would be a huge amount of, it would be a minefield because there's just not enough people who know how to do this in a way that is, they're not going to get your foot blown off. I mean, like every day someone loses $37 million of crypto because they typoed an address or something. And you see it all the time. So there's so much excitement, there's so much money, there's so much risk of losing the money, brand damage. It is this particular target market, if there is demand, is the perfect model for value pricing projects because there's so much risk, and all they really need, like they can probably get developers, but what they really need is experience.
Right.
And everything's so new. It's this combination of newness and excitement that creates the perfect storm for value pricing.
Yeah.
So that, if that was, to maybe switch over to product ladder a little bit, because you can't really talk about a product ladder unless you know who your target market is.
Sure.
So if that were the target market, gaming companies that were trying to create a secondary marketplace using NFTs and blockchain, and their own coin or something, that would be, so you'd have sort of a project, you'd have an advisory retainer, like oversight month to month. You probably could have a very specific training workshop for their developers.
Sure.
But in my limited experience with gaming companies, their developers are not web developers. Like they don't know anything about web development.
Right.
They're all game developers, which is a completely different stack.
It is, yeah.
And if they have, and like the marketing department would be the one with the web developers in general. I guess it depends, but yeah. So there could be. I could imagine X 2, 3, 4 day training crash course boot camp or something for game developers or people that work gaming company employees. I don't know what they would call them, to create in-game marketplace, or I guess it still would be in-game. Is that the right terminology?
Yeah, it would still be in-game. So the blockchain,
the skins wouldn't go anywhere else.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, because it's NFTs or whatever, if you want to put in your own wallet and go use OpenSea or whatever to do the secondary market, you can, but you would probably still build like an interface in the game for the secondary market part of it.
I think you'd have to, because if you're going to take this custodial approach and the wallet was only an option.
Yeah, I agree.
So they need, so the game company needs an OpenSea.
Yes.
Internally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically what we're talking about, and like, I'm not sold on the idea of just working with gaming companies. But let's run down that path. I could help indie game shops add NFT functionality to their games without alienating users or players.
Ooh, right? Yeah. That was a great way to put it. I'm glad we're recording this.
Yeah. Because I think that's a huge topic. Like, because like there's all sorts of things in the news from companies that announce NFTs and then quickly backpedal.
Yep.
And that's the moment that you want to avoid. So if you can de-risk the idea of getting into the space in their mind and in their players' perception, that's huge.
Right. And from the standpoint of the indie studio, the idea of being able to go to a Blizzard or something like that and say like, oh yeah, and we threaded that needle.
Yeah.
That is going to make you, I assume, because of the excitement, at least right now, I'm going to assume that is going to make that studio very attractive, like an acquisition target, or could raise tons of money because people are going to want to, like.
It's a good point. Yeah.
So it's attractive to the buyer in the studio.
Because if I were to go and try to consult Activision or Electronic Arts or whatever on adding NFTs into their games, I'm going to get passed around from executive to engineer, and it just doesn't feel good to me in terms of the size of the company. Mm-hmm. I would rather work with the small shops and make them more attractive to acquisition by the large companies.
Right.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. So that's okay. So that's interesting. But like you said, you're not convinced. But I actually know someone who works with indie studios that I'm sure would be happy to talk to you about the how realistic something like that would be. Because some of these studios are like just two people, and
sure,
you're right. So, but maybe there's a middle ground where, who knows? Maybe there's a middle ground.
Yeah.
I think Minecraft was two people. So
okay, cool.
Anyway, okay. So what are some other? So is the reasonably established, maybe not ginormous, but like an established Web2 company that you feel do you think there's demand from companies like that who want to get into the Web3 space, or at least find out if there are opportunities for them in Web3?
Yeah, there are. I'm still struggling to see like the best Web2 industry to target initially, because like the applicability of blockchain is very widespread. Like if you just look at the technology and you stop caring about the token price and the scheming and shilling and all that, there's a lot of power in decentralization and a distributed ledger. So we
That's
could
a novel
talk about
data store.
What was that?
It's a novel data store. It's like
Yes.
when relational databases came out. It was like it's broadly applicable, but at first it's like, well, what do we need this for? We have EDA or EDC or whatever it was called.
Right. Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, there's consumer startups. Like I have a podcast episode with a company called Ozone that they're basically trying to reward web users for their data, right? And that's pretty niche. There's not a whole lot of companies out there doing that. You have like, Honey and Rakuten and like that sort of coupon incentive space, and I don't really know what to call that. But there's interest there in adding in like a stable coin as rewards, and storing various data on blockchain and that sort of thing.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Why? It's like, see, the part of the decentralization thing is interesting to the end user. I would think it'd be more interesting to the end user than to any individual company, because it means their membership rewards can be spent anywhere. And the whole point of having membership rewards is to keep you locked in.
Right. Yeah.
So adding portability, spending money to add portability would be like cutting yourself with your own knife.
That's a good point. And yeah, like I think I've written about it before, where if you're talking about memberships, something like a Starbucks gift card, it doesn't really make sense to put that on blockchain, because it's it's inherently centralized. It's my company working with all of my customers to give them rewards at my company.
Right. It's meant to be a walled garden.
Right, exactly. And people are fine with that. So putting it on blockchain doesn't really add anything.
Right.
There's like, you could, but it's more like it's a level up from there. If you wanted to build an incentive program that can be spent at any number of places, like if you're Amex and you want to take your membership rewards and put that in a way that you can spend it with Hilton or Delta or whatever, that's something you could do on blockchain and potentially save yourself some effort.
Right. But they did do that through partnerships with those companies.
Exactly.
And it's just all behind the scenes and opaque and not, but so, okay.
Yeah. And now that it's built, they're not really looking to layer in blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it potentially would have been right. There might be another company that is similar in terms of what they offer, that doesn't want to go through all those partnerships and really would rather just have this essentially a protocol that people could opt into. More like trying to think of trying to think about. I feel like Zapier kind of reminds me of Zapier, but not exactly, because they must still have partnerships with the people that, like, if you could create your own Zaps, for your app. Like if I could create a Zap for my website, that other people could then use Zapier to integrate with my website. I mean, essentially that's just a front end for an API. So, but it's not important, because it makes the accessibility so much easier. Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Anyway, I think we're kind of dancing around the challenge here is companies that are in Web 2 and want to layer in blockchain understand that it's not an all or nothing thing. You don't want to force your users to learn about blockchain, set up a wallet, and buy tokens.
Correct.
That's how you alienate users. So you have to, either hide it with custodial accounts and, accepting credit card payments and handling everything kind of in-house behind the scenes.
But that's probably already built.
Mostly.
Well, sorry. What I meant was they probably already do have a lot of that stuff. Right.
Which means that it's just basically changing the workings behind the scenes. Right.
So why would I want to do that? So let's say I run a membership community. Let's say I run Teachable, which is like a place where people can sell courses, or Gumroad or something like that. Like these sort of platforms.
Sure.
It's not a gigantic company, but pretty big in terms of revenue. And what do I want that would cause me to be sniffing around someone like you? I want some of that Web3 money, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
You want some of the Web3 money. You want...
it would come from investors.
Which would come from investors. Maybe you want to do an IDO or something like that. I think that kind of the thing that I see that I don't think people are out sniffing for is that if you do it right, it can save you time and money and effort, because building a dApp that benefits from all the stuff that you get for free with blockchain and just leverages that system means you don't have to build the secondary marketplace. You don't have to build, transfers of data or, whatever, right? As long as you just write a, 50-line smart contract for an NFT, you get all of that stuff for free. So there's a lot less maintenance headache of keeping your systems running. You get to focus more on the end result for your users and spend your development time on things that are closer to the user instead of the stuff behind the scenes that they don't benefit from. It needs to be there, but it's not really a value add in the user's mind.
Right. So from a developer standpoint, if I were building something new, like a SaaS, I would be, and wallets were widely accepted in my target market. Like my target market, everybody's got a wallet. Let's just say,
Sure.
fast forward a few years, and it's like having an email. Like, yeah, you have a wallet. Duh, everyone has a wallet.
Right.
Like maybe it gets built into some of the most popular browsers or something in a way that's actually secure. I don't know. Like everyone has a wallet now, or at least in my target market of developers, let's say. And I'm like, I want to build a SaaS. Me, Jonathan Stark, would absolutely do that. I would absolutely. I mean, the amount of time and money it would save to not have to build all of that non-value add garbage in the background. It's not, I mean, you need it right now, but no, thank you. I don't want any of that stuff.
Right.
But let's say, but that's coming at it from scratch. If I have a SaaS, like that's who we were talking about. I already built all that stuff. My dev team already built all that stuff. It's probably integrated with Stripe or something similar. And really, it's too late. Like I would just be deleting a bunch of code and giving myself a worse onboarding experience for my users. So that'd be a net negative.
Right.
Maybe it would decrease ongoing maintenance costs or like server costs or database costs. Maybe not. So it feels more like the cash grab is the thing that would cause a Web 2 company or the possible feeling of irrelevance. But I think it's way too early for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like there are companies who are excited about the idea of NFTs or whatever, right? They want in on that because it makes them look more attractive to investors, and you know, it is a money grab in some way. I'm not all that interested in the money grab side of it, but I think that that's maybe the entry point to where I can start collecting some more quantitative, you know, if you do this for your business, then we can cut your costs by X% or something like that. So
maybe. I mean, I'm always like, you're playing in a space where, well, let me back up. So when I talk about a positioning statement, it's got 4 components, like a laser focused positioning statement. It's got your discipline, which is what you'd call yourself, and maybe you'd call yourself like a Web3 consultant or something. And then there's the target market, which we've been talking about the most. And then there's the expensive problem. That's usually what I call it. But there's a flip side of expensive problem, which is more of a cost savings type of thing. But usually it's much easier. It's usually much easier to sell a buyer on cutting this $10,000 a month out of their budget or whatever the cost savings would be. But there's a flip side to it. Some companies aren't looking to do that. Some companies are looking to capture a big opportunity, and that's the kind of space you're in.
Right.
So it feels like it would be 2 dramatically different kinds of buyers. They'd probably have different job titles. They'd have different motivations. If you were selling your services as a cost-cutting measure, you're going to probably be talking to CFOs or COOs or CTOs, probably not even CTOs. It'd be like the managerial people that count the beans and make sure the trains run on time.
Sure.
If you're selling the big opportunity, you're talking to the CEO, the founder, the visionary. So, you know, and it's a tougher sell. It's usually tougher to get to those people. And, you know, given an organization of a particular size, it's the hardest person to get to is going to be the person on top. So, but that is the person who sees the future and will make bets on the opportunity. And so the space that you're in it would be a huge difference in a day-to-day experience, like like your working life would be very different working with, let's just say a COO versus a CEO.
True.
CEO is probably going to have shiny object syndrome and have a million ideas every day. The COO is going to be the polar opposite in general. They're going to be like, just give me the facts. Why isn't this done yet? You said it was only going to cost blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But they're going to be way more focused. You know, I'm painting with a broad brush, but generally that's going to be the COO is there to keep the CEO on a leash, basically.
Right.
Keep everything on track, like to make sure that the train gets to where, you know, there's tracks that lead to where the CEO wants to go on the train. So that would be that's like a fork in the road.
Yeah.
Do you want to cut costs? Then COO is probably your person, or do you want to capture the big opportunity and talk more with the visionary, maybe a product person, you know, if it was a really big organization?
Yeah, I feel like for where I'm at right now, I want to work with companies that are coming from Web 2 over to Web 3, who are maybe 50 to 100 people tops. And I want to work with the CEO and the CTO because it's all about the big opportunity, which the CEO should understand why this is important. And the CTO is going to be responsible for the technical direction. And that's the part that I will really help with.
Okay. So it's a Web 2 company. Is it a SaaS? Is it a social media platform?
I think so. It's tough. I'm still at the point where I'm thinking I can help anybody. Right. And that's not true. You don't have time and you got to fish in a barrel, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I could go niche on gaming companies or something that's very industry specific, but I think that the applicability of what I'm talking about is much broader than that. And
sure,
I think I would run out of content if I just focused on gaming companies.
I think that's highly unlikely.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, I understand the impulse, but I think it's pretty unlikely. Okay. And the other thing to point out is, like, positioning is not a face tattoo. So It could be for 18 months. It could be for 6 months. It could be, you can broaden. Like usually what happens is when somebody gets a really good, really narrow, focused positioning statement, or, and sort of propagates that through all of their messaging, and they'll start to, when it's working, they'll immediately get traction in their target market.
Yeah.
And it'll be exciting. You can feel it. You start getting inbound leads. Like, what? Inbound leads? And people on LinkedIn saying, oh, we need to talk. Here's my phone number. So great. And let's say you're focusing on, at the time, let's say you were focusing just on like indie gaming studios.
Sure.
So it's like, okay, you start to get traction. And then what happens is, because you're doing a daily list, you're doing the podcast, and the word spreads. And what happens is you start to get leads from adjacent spaces because they are seeing the thing that already, which is that this is applicable to other industries. And what's wild is they come to you apologetically saying, I know I'm really not in your space, but could I pay you for that strategy session? I know I'm not a gaming studio, but we do this other thing that's similar. It will not filter out people who get it. Like it'll actually, I almost think that those people, the adjacent people, are almost better leads than the ones in your target market.
Sure.
It's certainly not uncommon because they get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're the ones that really get it. So, it was like, if I'm always talking about ditching hourly billing, of course, eventually some lawyer is going to be like, maybe I should look into this. But if I just talked in general about hourly billing at a very theoretical, platonic level, the platonic ideal of pricing or something, then it just gets so abstract that you only attract people that are like academic or who already understand what you're talking about and therefore don't need you. So it's all about, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of localization from web development. And it's like you almost need to localize blockchain and related technologies for a person who speaks a particular business language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to get started. Like once you have a more broad reputation, you got these fawning testimonials for like how you transform their business, and they had $1 billion valuation after 6 months of working with you. Then that word's going to spread, and then the fire starts to spread on its own. Like once you get it going, it starts to spread. So point being, this is me talking way too long about a point that you made, which is that you're not going to run out of content. Okay. Because then you can start talking about like, oh, well, here's an example from outside of my normal space, whatever, just talk about the other one. And then you can, once you start the fire, like the magnifying glass focuses the sun's rays, starts the fire. Once you've got it sufficiently spread, you can put the magnifying glass down.
Sure.
It's not forever. Anyway.
Cool. No, I like that.
Okay, cool.
That's helpful. I hadn't really thought about, positioning isn't forever. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good message. Because you're right. Like as I'm thinking through, the different topics I could go over for gaming or whatever industry, there's definitely a lot of depth there. And it's honestly like it's the same content I've been writing. It's just a different lens.
Exactly.
So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to experiment with it, you could get in touch with a bunch of indie studios. That wouldn't be hard to find.
Sure.
And just say, hey, do you have any questions about blockchain or Web3 or anything like that? I'm doing, I do this daily newsletter, or, I'd love to have you on my podcast to interview you about it, about what your questions are, how you're thinking about it. And you'd find out pretty quickly if there was actually any appetite. It's just a hypothesis that we have here. You'd need to prove it, validate it. And, for example, if you reached out to 50 indie game studio CEOs or CTOs, and not one person took you up on the idea of interviewing, like doing a Q&A. Yeah. Well, then there's no they're not interested. Yeah. But if 50% of them say yes, then all of a sudden,
Okay. Good point.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the questions that they ask would be 6 months worth of emails. Maybe not 6 months, but
Good point. And fill out the podcast roster and all that. So
yeah, that too. So but not to, I'm definitely not trying to push you in that direction.
For sure.
It just seems like the most obvious one so far. It seems like the best hypothesis so far.
Yeah.
But I do like the specificity of your sort of Web2 CEOs or CTOs at Web2 companies that employ 50 to 100 people. That's demographically, that's extremely specific. And you could pull up a list of those companies on LinkedIn very easily.
Sure.
And then you could go down that list and you could categorize them into different industries or different, you could kind of, I would imagine, I would want to go down that list and think like, I see this category like, oh, there's a whole bunch of like media companies in that, or like event planning companies, and be like, oh no, rule that out. Or some kind of, I don't know, online event production or remote event production or something. It's just something you're going to see patterns and be like, can I think of any interesting use cases for that industry? And if you can maybe come up with some ideas, then connect with those people and say, hey, it's same thing. Hey, have you guys, I wouldn't say it explicitly, like, do you have any appetite for Web3? But it's like, hey, have you guys been exploring NFTs or crypto or blockchain or any of that stuff?
Right.
And then insert idea that you think might be an appropriate application of the technology for a business like that. And if you're going to find out right away, they're going to be like, no, we haven't thought about that at all. What's that? Never heard of it. Or funny, you should ask. We've been searching around for a Web3 expert.
Cool. No, that's good advice. And I feel like I could easily throw together like a 1 to 3 page PDF that I could, reskin with different industries and different takes. And just offer that as a lead magnet. And then
test the waters.
Yeah. When I reach out, say, hey, if you're interested, here's a document that you can get for free that maybe addresses some of your questions about Web3 for your business.
Yeah. I would do a little for something like this. If you're doing direct outreach, I'd move pretty slow. I'd do a little courtship there even before asking for the email and say like, unless the person is like super hot to trot.
Okay.
So if they were like, I would just try and ask questions in DM or see if you can switch to phone or see if you can switch them to the podcast. If they're like, if you sense an excitement.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could certainly, I'm sort of a soft sell kind of guy. Like I'm just looking for people that I'm not the type of person to like walk up to somebody and be like, oh, it looks like you need my help.
Yeah.
Like, like you say back in the day when I'd see like a website or I'd use a website that was just hideous on a phone. And that was what I did for a living. I still wouldn't reach out to the CEO and be like, dude, have you seen your site on mobile? It's unusable. By the way, I happen to fix that.
Right.
So I would think of it more just super exploratory, not even a list building exercise. That'll happen automatically because they'll see, in my profile, I'd make sure my profile on LinkedIn, if that's where you're going to do it, I'd make sure my profile was as clear as humanly possible.
Sure.
For what your value proposition is and how they could, what's in it for them if they interact with you. But yeah, I would just test the waters real, connect with 20, 30 people a day, look for patterns in the industries, come up with some potential use cases, and then say, hey, have you ever thought about, blah, 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 whatever you think the use case might be. And then be like, who's this guy? And then it's going to say under your smiling face next to your name, it's going to say, whatever you put that makes sense for the outreach that you're doing. So I would even consider changing my headline while I'm doing the outreach if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay. So
cool. Yeah, I might just play around with the gaming angle because I feel I'm thinking about new things here now with, there's NFTs and all that, but a lot of times game studios want to create a spin-off game. And if you have a lot of that data on the blockchain, well, you can keep the same logins and start players out with all the same items and skins that they had from the old game and that sort of thing. So
interesting.
There's lots of opportunities here that might be interesting to game shops. So
yeah, again, I'm not pushing that direction, but when I do, I always, but this is a really interesting one. And I say that because I can think of all of these ideas for emails and podcast episodes that would be super interesting.
Yeah.
So like I can imagine interviews and stuff that you could do, and I'm not in your target market. I'm not in that target market, but if it'd be interesting to me and I'm not even in the target market, then you can imagine that for other people who are, it would be like must listen territory. Mm-hmm. And it's just, my head's exploding with ideas of questions that you could ask these people, different applications. You could have a whole series of like, you could find a bunch of people who have done that, like who's made spin-off games.
Yeah.
And just interview them about the experience of migrating the user accounts. What was that like? And there'd be no end to the content. It would never go away.
Cool.
Even if you stayed focused, probably.
Awesome. Well, that's really helpful. Thank you, Jonathan.
Cool.
I would love to keep going on this, but I think we're probably over time here.
Yeah, I'm nuking your day. But so the product ladder thing, we can maybe loop back, do that over email. But I wouldn't start with a product ladder yet until you want to find out what your target market is, and then what they want, and then how you can contribute to it, and then you can start thinking product ladder.
Cool. Yeah, so I've got some homework to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, let me know how it goes. And in the meantime, where can people go to find out more about what you're doing if they're interested in this stuff?
Yeah, so the best place is probably lukewillis.com. I have links to my newsletter and my social, Twitter, LinkedIn, all that. So if you want to connect, feel free to shoot me an email you can just subscribe to my newsletter and hit reply at any point. I respond to any and every email.
Great. All right. Yeah. If people are interested in all these shenanigans, Luke's a great, straight talking plain English type of resource, which I love. So check it out.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan.
My pleasure. All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time for Ditching Hourly.